kind of funny, this music, but I'm gonna just go with it.
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Welcome to our program today. We're so happy you guys all made the time to join us. I'm sure most of you have had a long day already.
Definitely. Heidi, what are your kids doing these days? Are they going to school, or are they at home, or hybrid?
Yeah, my kids go to a Littleton public school, and they are in elementary school, so they are doing the in-person learning currently. But I do know that Cherry Creek just got an email, families got an email about possibly going back soon to at-home learning. So that makes me a little nervous. So I'm interested what Silvia has to say as y'all are potentially preparing for transition of some sort.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it seems like it could change at any day, the situation.
Yeah, it definitely is. We all are just kind of waiting and seeing.
Well, we'll be sharing lots of great resources this evening that will hopefully be helpful and enlightening in these strange times.
Yeah, definitely interesting times. It's interesting right now. Every school district is doing something a little bit different. So I know not everyone went back. There's some schools that are just now starting to go to in-person learning just within the last couple of weeks. But now that one of our schools is maybe thinking about going to in-person, it's just hard to keep up with it all.
How much notice, I mean, I think you only know probably from your own experience, but how much notice do you get when these shifts happen?
Well, the only shift we've had notice-wise was in the springtime, and I think that was a few days, less than a week. A week at the most, I think, is what we got in notice. And I think it was only a couple days.
I think sometimes it's as little as 24 hours if you have enough teachers out or something like that.
Yeah. I do know for the most part with Littleton schools that any of the COVID cases that kids have had, this is on the superintendent reporting out, has not been from in-class or school transmission. It's been from like family members or other social gatherings outside of school. And so the superintendent of Littleton was saying how preliminarily that's showing that a lot of the safety measures that are being put into place seem to be working, but we'll see. It's all still.
So what is it like for your kids? Like, is there no recess, or what is lunch like?
They do have recess. They have to wear their masks all day long. No parents or people outside of the school staff can go in the building. Even for Halloween parties and, all the volunteers that normally would come into the school to help out the classrooms and events and stuff, that's not happening. And they get to have recess. That's the only time they can take off their mask during school time is for when they eat and then when they're playing on the equipment.
I obviously don't have children, and I wonder, I read it in the news and I hear it from you all that have some experience, but I'm very interested still to hear what Sylvia is going to talk about tonight and relay it to my friends too that couldn't make it this evening.
Yeah. Well, and it affects the whole community.
Everyone,
whether, you know, don't have kids.
There is a school in my neighborhood. It's a Montessori school, and it's been closed this whole time because I walk my dogs by it and I haven't seen anyone there. So they must operate on their own. We'll get started in just, I'll say 2 minutes. We'll start off with Heidi.
That's a good question about private schools, what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm gonna stop my music and get my Zoom instructions going here. Which I know most of us are pretty familiar with Zoom, but we always like to do this just to be efficient and make sure sometimes we just need little reminders. And we also like to share something upcoming, and that is a tribute to the Neil Diamond concert coming up. We have had a reoccurring presenter who is just wonderful at doing these kinds of programs for us. So please come and join us Thursday, October 22nd at 2 p.m. if you can, and check that out if you are a Neil Diamond fan or just want to hear some music. And on to our Zoom instructions. I believe everyone is muted, but if we have a point where we are asking you to unmute yourself, you can do that in the lower left corner of your screen there. You can turn on and off your video as well at the next button over. Moving on down the line there at the bottom of your screen, there's the participant button. You can see who's in our room today. If you need to raise your hand, you can do so with that virtual little button there, that blue hand. If you would like to change your name, you can do so here on the screen as well. Just find your name and click over on the right. Sometimes it just says like iPad and you want your actual name, you can do that. If you have any technical issues, feel free to send those to me in the chat. That button also is down at the bottom bar. If you have questions for our presenter today, Nicole's going to be taking those. So please send those to her and she's going to accumulate all of those and give those to our presenter when needed and appropriate. And you can scroll down and find the names there. You can have it on speaker view, which we recommend today, or gallery view, where you can see everyone in the room. You can change the size of your screen. If you can make it smaller and bigger here up at the top. Side-by-side mode. So if you would like our presenter speaking on one side of your screen and her presentation on the other, you can do so with the side-by-side mode button there. If you happen to be calling in by phone, you can push *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute your microphone. And again, if you have any questions about the technology, feel free to send those to me. And if you have questions for our presenter today, Sylvia, please send those to Nicole. And without further ado, I'm going to pass the virtual microphone over to Nicole.
Thanks so much, Heidi. I'm Nicole, and that was Heidi, and we're part of the Arapahoe Library's events team. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am going to hand it over to our Teen Services librarian, Catherine Bodie. She's going to talk to you a little bit about our educator and parent support page.
Thank you. Let me share my screen so that I can kind of guide you through. As Nicole mentioned, I'm one of the Teen Services librarians. I am part of the team of librarians who work with our school-aged children. So I work with middle and high school students along with a couple of my coworkers, and we also have a couple of librarians who are devoted to working with elementary age students, and then we also have folks that work with our preschool kids. So we just wanted to share a resource that we have on our website for parent and educator support. We recognize that this year in particular is a tricky time to be educating young kids. And so we want to just kind of let you know that the library is here for your support. And we actually have a resource page that has all kinds of information, different tools and databases and other resources and things that could help if you are doing either a hybrid model or at-home learning completely, or if your kids are fully in school. So that is available if you go to the arapahoelibraries.org, our home page, and then click on the services tab. And then here under support, the last one is educator and parent support. And this page takes you to our resource page that has lots of different options. We do everything from making library cards for entire classrooms of students to individuals, as well as virtual visits and gathering up materials for you. So if you do have an assignment or something, we can help you locate the materials you might need for that. So you can request a library card for yourself or for a group if you do work with a group of students, and we can work with you to get those cards made. We are recommending, if possible, to work with us through the form to do permanent cards, because temporary cards expire after 6 months and you can't access all of the resources that are available. There are a few things that don't work on it, but then you can just kind of search by age, depending on what age your kiddos are. And you can go to that section, and we have different options of things that are available. Everything from tutorial videos of how to use some of the electronic resources we have, like the Overdrive for Kids page, our homework resources for elementary school children, all of those different things. We do, it's a screen share guided tour of those, as well as some other options, homeschool resources that we have gathered from around the internet, as well as Colorado state guidelines as far as that goes. We do book talks for elementary and middle and high school students every month. We are filming those right now, and those get posted up on this page as well. Or if you just want to ask us a question, you can hit this Get Started button. It takes you to a form where you can start your request. The option to ask a general question is there, and you can just type in what you're wanting to know. Essentially, that gets you connected directly to one of our librarians. And even if you aren't quite sure what you need, we can work with you to start to get the details and work through what would work best for you, how we can best support you. So that is our educator and parent support page. We would love to hear from you. We recognize that often this is directed towards teachers, but we are here for you as parents as well this year, and always, really. So please do feel free to reach out. If you ever even just have a question, we're happy to answer those. I believe Nicole is going to share the link for that page, as well as my email address. You can also feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have in that way.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And yes, I did just share your information in the chat. So if you want to go ahead and copy and paste that and save it for later. And if you forget it for some reason, don't hesitate to email me or Heidi, and we can get you the information later. So I'm excited to introduce our speaker this evening. Dr. Silvia Noguerón-Liu is an assistant professor of literacy studies at CU Boulder. Some of the focuses of her research include the critical examination of digital literacies and technology access in classrooms and communities, and participatory and community-based research in family literacy and homeschool partnerships. We are really excited to have Dr. Noguerón-Liu with us to provide us some guidance on parenting and education during COVID. So without further ado, I'm going to invite her to join us. Hello.
Hello. Hi. Hello to everybody. Hello from campus. I'm on my campus office today. So is it okay to start the presentation?
Yeah, let's get started. Absolutely.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. And it's interesting to think if I could be in a room with all of you together. And I'm just happy that you're here to have this conversation. So I'm going to share my screen and hope you'll be able to see my slides. So I think right now, can you give me a thumbs up if you see? Yes, perfect. I'm gonna start my little timer here. So I am Silvia Noguerón-Liu, and I wanna thank Jan, Nicole, and all the team members in the Arapaho Libraries for this invitation. I love to work with libraries, and it's part of that important space where families and schools and teachers come together. So I'm so glad to be here. I will, let's see if this works. Great. So I have a plan for today for these 15 minutes and allotting some time for Q&A. But if somebody thinks of something while I'm presenting, you can type it in the chat and I'll be able to stop. And as Nicole will share the questions with me, I can answer. So I'll start with just a brief overview of a model of home and school partnerships prior to COVID, some of the ideas of how we think about teachers and parents working together. And then I'll spend 15 minutes thinking about that relationship piece, about how do we communicate with teachers when we come together in parent-teacher conferences, when we come together and try to troubleshoot the challenges ahead of us. And most of the time will be spent on learning at home, building routines, some common questions I get about technology, media, and learning supports for reading. Some of them I will explain, but I have prepared also resources at the end that you can browse at your own in your own time. And at the end, if there's time, I'll share some of my favorite books with some ideas, and hopefully there'll be time for questions. So, and I just want to say that yes, you will be able to have the slides. So if you're registered for this event, you will receive a PDF with the links. There are multiple links and sources. And at the end, there's a collection of videos. So I just need to make sure they work. And if somebody asks something and I don't have the answer today, I'll be able to do a little research and then add that information. So I just want to make sure I have that, that space to address anything I may not have ready today, in addition to my slides. So a little bit about me and what brings me to this event. My research since 2009 when I completed my PhD, and then in 2011, I was a professor at the University of Georgia, and I started to work with schools and families designing programs where parents and children read together, do research together, and use technology together. Now you may be thinking about this, my strange last name and my accent. I was born and raised in Mexico, so a lot of the work I do is with bilingual families, with Spanish-speaking families, and I was a bilingual teacher in kindergarten and 5th grade and some middle school as well. And it seems like a very long time ago as I get older. I mean, those children must be in college already. So those studies, even as I moved to Colorado in 2015, and we've done summer programs where parents and kids do research together, go to the museum together, and we kind of wonder about what can we write, what can we learn, and what can we research using our two languages. As part of my teaching and outreach, I co-direct the Literacy and Media Lab with my colleague, Dr. Bridget Dalton. So we have a partnership with an elementary school where we host children. Having in the fall, we have a reading club, which is tutoring for upper elementary students. And in the spring, we have a digital and media lab after school. And all the activities are connected to reading English language arts standards. And the instructors are our students in our master's program. And previously, I also worked in Georgia in a master's program that was fully online. So I have some insights on how to design online instruction. So I think that all of this converged when COVID started. And then I realized, oh, I thought I knew something, but everything that's happening is so new and I guess unprecedented that we're trying to rethink what does it mean to learn online? What does it mean for parents and teachers to collaborate in new ways? So there will be a survey coming your way. And I'm just curious to know the grade levels represented in the audience. So that way, some of the slides I have prepared, I may spend some more time in it and just make choices depending on the grade levels represented. So good, I see that we have all the grade levels and some middle school as well. Okay, first, great. So we have a lot of K first. This is important information because as part of my teaching, I prepare pre-service teachers who will be teaching reading at the elementary level. So teaching reading everything changes developmentally. Every grade level is so different. And even within a grade level, you have so much diversity. So it really helps me to see the span of what grade levels are represented. And I think people are still answering. And
we have 70% of the people have voted so far. but it looks like 65% are K through first grade. And then we have 29% are second through fourth, 35% are fourth to fifth. Oh, that just went up to 33%. And then we have 17% in middle school and 6% in high school. Thank you everyone for voting.
Thank you. And the second question, I think it's kind of in flux, because I learned, as we are following the news, that some districts are coming back probably to remote learning soon. I am an Adams 12 parent. My son is 3, so he's not yet going to school, but those are the board meetings I attend. And I know that part of what we need to do this semester is to think about that back and forth, and how do we adjust with our children and with our routines as children, as things change and then things change in K to second, upper elementary, middle school. So if your children are attending multiple grade levels, then as a parent, you must be wondering, well, how are the schedules going to work? And that's part of the challenge that I see. So I see some of you are fully remote and doing the alternation or fully in person. And something I've been thinking, my master students are wonderful, and they're all teachers in 4 different districts. And I noticed just how the in-person transition also brings different challenges to reading instruction, because we're giving assessments to children wearing masks and teaching phonics and teaching them how to use language. And so that adds to the social distancing adds challenges that we're trying to figure out together. So I see some distribute both in person and remote. Thank you. So I guess I can see the I'm gonna move the screen. I think Melange, share results. Oh, I guess I see the poll because I'm a co-host, but I'm gonna move it. Here it is, I see it. Great.
You can exit out, Sylvia. You don't need to.
Great.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
So I'll share. So one of the ideas that I've been thinking a lot about, because I'm often in the middle, working with parents and teachers and being like a mediator in between the 2 groups. So trust is something that we have been thinking about and theorizing in all types of school-home partnerships. And the resource I'm citing, it's a model for family engagement developed by a Harvard Graduate School of Education professor. And this is basically a process, but I'm just going to mention some ideas. And trust is one of the new components that are central. And the model includes some of the challenges that I think both parents and teachers faced prior to COVID. Are there good examples of how can we collaborate and communicate? Maybe we haven't seen good examples. Maybe we have, or somebody has deficit mindsets about each other. Like, well, this is what this person doesn't know, or this is what this person does not understand. And we focus on what they don't know or understand. That we may have had a difficult experience, teachers with a parent or parents with a teacher. And in the role of parents, maybe we don't feel invited or welcome or valued or heard. And those are just foundations. And that now this brings more challenges because we are not actually seeing each other if everything is happening through email and remotely. So some of the goals in this model include tasks or steps for educators and parents. So we want to make sure teachers can connect family engagement to children's learning, engage families as co-creators, honor the knowledge they bring, and create a welcoming space. And now the roles for parents is what I've been thinking a lot about, because before COVID, we wanted parents to come in and co-create with us. Let's create a read aloud together. Let's find a way to bring you in and create something together. But with COVID, we are, whether we wanted that or not, we are co-designers, we are co-teachers, like we have taken a role that we were not anticipating. And the other roles that required different investments of our time, supporter, encouraging monitors, are we monitoring the homework has been done, the children log in, advocating for children when they face a challenge, being a model of how do we read. Those require different investments of our time. And now we're up in this level of we are a team in a very different capacity. And the two aspects of family partnership I will address today include the building relationship step of how do we communicate and build that relationship, and the links to learning. So there are other components such as addressing our difference, problem solving, supporting advocacy, but those I will not address today. I will just focus on learning and this relationship piece. So I'm just gonna skip this slide to start with. How do we establish communication routines? And then by now, or pretty soon, you will be in a parent-teacher conference that will be very unique, because children have gone through multiple transitions since the beginning of the school year. Some schools began fully remote, some schools came back, or may have to go back to some form of remote learning again. So I anticipate these parent-teacher conferences will be very, very unique. So I will talk about that. As you get to know your children's teacher, just know that they really want to know. You're the expert in what has happened in 5 months. So in some ways, what I hear from teachers is we really want to know what has happened, because we don't know what happened in the summer. So in some ways, you know what your child has done, and you know their interests, their goals, their sense of themselves as learners, and also your own preferences, because we already went through a period of trying things out in March. You kind of know what you prefer or how you feel about your child being in Zoom, your child using email, so you can communicate that information. And you share a common goal, your child becoming independent and successful in reading. And I will be, I don't know if I said this at the beginning, my emphasis will be on literacy, not necessarily on other subjects, so just on reading. Important information for all of you to have includes what, and probably you already shared this because this is mid-October. How long do we expect before emailing a person again if we send an email and we don't get a response immediately? And that goes both ways in terms of when, if I get an email and I'm expected to respond, how do we reach back? How do we build a routine to remember, okay, maybe I need to send an email again, because I communicate with teachers a lot and I know they have a lot on their plate. So maybe if I send an email at the end of the week, maybe it won't be as it will be easier to get a response as opposed to the beginning of the week. So getting to know that pace of when to email each other. How can we reach each other, and what do we prefer? Are we okay with phone? Do we want to use ClassDojo or the school platform? I found talking to teachers that sometimes it's confusing where to look for email, because Seesaw or ClassDojo have an email or a message feature, and sometimes announcements go in there, but they don't go in the other emails. So we just need to be clear on where do we look for things. That was one of the main challenges I found in March, that there were so many platforms, and we didn't, and parents sometimes they don't know where to find things because there were just so many ways to communicate. So just setting on one and being consistent. And that's something that I also share with teachers. Just be consistent, or just send a message across all the platforms so that to make sure people get them. Now, this is something I hear. I gave an interview over the summer about family engagement, and this idea that everybody's really behind. And this is something I hear across the board, teachers, families, and the media. And I came across this article where this professor said a way to reframe that is, instead of saying they're so behind or children are behind, is how do we ensure that they get the best possible opportunities to learn under these challenging circumstances? So we just focus on smaller goals and opportunities to learn specific goals, then it doesn't feel as big as everything is behind. It's months of missed learning. So just keeping it, okay, from now on, what are some opportunities for new content? What new content are we going to focus on, as opposed to looking back and saying, well, there's all this catching up to do. And this is an article from Tim Shanahan, who is a very renowned reading scholar. And he wrote a blog article about exactly this question, like, well, we have all this lost reading time. What should parents do? And something he brought up is this: from March to May, it was the end of the school year. So those months were really kind of like a review and wrapping up the school year. So it's not really like 5 months, but it's the summer. And now in fall, it's good to just think of the priorities for your child or for the grade level in the different aspects of reading. And I didn't, and in his article, he talks about, for example, in K to second, we're going to do a lot of learning how to decode, learning phonics, recognizing words, solving words. But I found, I mean, your child may be in 3rd grade, 4th grade, and already working on phonics knowledge, or your child may be in 1st, 2nd grade and already reading chapter books. So all of these goals, I think, are important in every grade level. Then there's practice reading aloud, fluency. So reading and rereading and sounding like we're talking. And across grade levels in different ways, with different supports, we could discuss what has been read, doing research. So everything that's about comprehension. So when we work with students in our after school reading club, where we do tutoring, we find which one of these aspects does the child need support in, and we look at the assessment data, and that's where we really target our instruction. Now, this model may be hard to see, but you will get it in the PDF. It's been very highly circulated in social media and in materials that I've been reviewing for my classes about reading. And it creates like a woven, a braid that brings the different skills together. And I'll read them because the print is very small. So on the top, we have language comprehension, background knowledge, what children know about specific subjects, vocabulary, language structures like syntax, what is a verb, a noun, verbal reasoning, inference, metaphor, and literacy knowledge, what is narrative like, what is non-expository text like. So all of those, we use strategies, and they're complex to assess because when I give you my answer of what I'm inferring for the reading, the answer will vary so much from child to child, depending on the knowledge they bring to the text, depending on the kind of question we ask. But those skills at the bottom, word recognition, phonological awareness, that clapping syllables, stretching a word, tapping the sounds inside a word, decoding, phonics, knowing your alphabet letters, and recognizing words at sight words, those are automatic. So there's always one right answer, right? Whether you know this is uppercase A or not, or tap cat into 3 sounds, into individual sounds, k, t, cat. So there's only one answer, but those skills on top are more complex and they're assessed in different ways and they all come together. So when we have opportunities to discuss assessment results with teachers, I think something I'd be very curious, and I talk to teachers in my classes, is, well, parents have been observing children at home for so many months. So we can't expect them to actually conduct the same assessments we do in school, but if there are specific challenges you observe, behaviors, or specific types of words that they can solve, that's information the teacher can use. Are there tasks, types of tasks that the teacher expects the child to complete independently? I think this is something that can be confusing because, and I'll explain this in a couple more slides, because sometimes teachers may expect the child to complete their writing assignment, and even if the words are spelled differently, they want to see if how the child is spelling those words. So are they expecting the child to get help from the parent or not? I think clarifying that may be helpful to know what tasks are really, really important that the child completes independently, and in which ones should they have more support. So that also releases you from, okay, I need to be helping them in every single task in this remote learning plan. And what are specific and few targeted learning goals that are a priority? So is it going to be just sight words? Is it going to be maybe wondering about inferences when they retelling a story, something very specific? And alongside with that I share with teachers is, here's a goal and here are some supports. So you don't feel like, well, I have to teach my child this. It's like, well, and here are the supports that we're providing at school, the types of books, the small group instruction. And a small group instruction is usually where a lot of this targeted support is taking place, and what can be sent home. And now I'm going to move on to learning at home resources. And I'm going to talk about routines, digital concerns, and learning supports. So one of the first documents I started sharing when we went to remote learning was this document about expectations or just good practices for work with younger children at the preschool kindergarten age, when they were starting to get, if you have a kindergarten at doing remote learning, there's just so much that can be done in small, short time periods where they really can sit down and pay attention if they're just listening. So what this resource from a colleague at UT Austin says is 15 minutes and then releasing them for a different activity for 45 minutes where they practice. So if we have them at home and we want them to engage in activities, they only need 15 minutes of direct support, and then the rest of time they can engage with activities on their own. Now I have a young child and I know that 15 minutes is not like, okay, 15 minutes and then you wait. It's like a snack and I need this and knocking the door. So when I saw this first, I thought, well, how realistic can this be? But for the design of activities, then we can't really have them sit for too long. Even in our tutoring, in our after school program, we could have short periods of intense practice with phonics or with spelling, and then a fun activity. And then we're reviewing the same pattern again, doing something. So we wouldn't just drag an activity for a very long amount of time. Keeping things simple in terms of a schedule. I remember when everything went online, there were so many schedules of all the things that were going to happen during home learning. And then by May, it was kind of like, well, we tried. And if we could accomplish 2 things, I mean, that's keeping things simple and reasonable in terms of, can we accomplish 2 or 3 things today? And then tomorrow will be a new day where we try this again. And also and this is specifically connected to technology, creating versus consuming media, it's another important balance, because if we spend all of our time just consuming and viewing, then, I mean, we may get a different learning experience when we start creating or making or writing. And that goes again with reading and writing, because reading can be more consuming and writing is composing a text. So there's that balance is also important. Now this slide connects to my question that had about teachers and what is expected to be done independently versus what is expected to be done with some support. And this is how teachers would organize their time with children during the literacy block, and also their lessons in what we call a gradual release of responsibility. So during the beginning of the lesson and in certain parts of the day, the teachers will be doing most of the modeling very directly and explaining. So what we usually recognize as teaching or lecturing. I do, you watch. Then we take that same idea and we practice it together. Like today we did a lesson on fluency where we model how do we read with expression and sound like a pirate. And let me do it first. Now let's do it together. Then in your small group, you practice, you and your peers practice. And then the child is supposed to apply that skill to independent practice, doing it by themselves. And now what I've noticed with remote learning is that there's like, I can clearly see the beginning and the end, but the middle is where I wonder, okay, where did the middle go? Because we don't have the same possibilities to keep children in Zoom for long periods of time. So it may be the case that some teachers are doing the modeling in maybe a video a child can watch again, or maybe they're doing it in a mini lesson in the morning. So, and then the guided practice and the collaboration may happen in a breakout, or may happen as children reading with a peer. And that independent practice is usually what may be landing on your schedule, on the asynchronous time, where children are supposed to practice something the teacher explained. So what I've been noticing that it's, I guess, a question parents have is, where do I have to reteach this? Do I have to start from scratch with this homework? I mean, that's the whole principle of homework, that we will be reviewing, not necessarily starting from scratch. So identifying those resources, maybe there's a video or a handout where that modeling happened. And then I also wonder who can be a partner in a we do kind of practice. If the child is expected to read aloud 30 minutes or 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes would be too long, read aloud, then can be, can there be a sibling? Can there be, what kind of partner does the child need to practice the skill? So it's not always the parent. Or can it be a grandparent who is in Zoom, or somebody, because I only have one child, so I can also imagine what it's like when your child is on their own. Now, this is a question that I also get often that is about screen time. And these are the pre-COVID guidelines, because I know as a parent, I like to have a number, but this was 2016. So, and this is what I got when I had my son under 18 months, no screens. And then when they're toddlers, having some supervision. My child is 3 years old, and I assure you, he watches more than 1 hour of TV currently, but that's a recommendation. And 6 years and older, it wasn't so much quantity as much as quality. So that is the current recommendation, not so much measuring the time, but thinking about what is it that they're watching. And the links in here will have those guidelines, and also Healthy Children, which is related to the Association of Pediatrics, has a family media plan tool that I found really interesting. It had a lot of questions and recommendations, and then it gives you a printout. So I found it a bit overwhelming, and I'm like, I don't know how realistically I can follow this plan, but it's a good resource. Now, during COVID, the Association of Pediatrics kind of they have to rethink their guidelines, because the reality is we are all connected online. So they still recommend making a plan with time for ways to handle stress, have breaks, and connect with each other, including family outside the household, communicating with teachers about having offline activities in addition to online activities. And the 2 articles from the New York Times I cited in there included these, I guess, acronyms like that can help us think. It's not about time, it's about what does the child need, what are their interests, what type of content are they watching, and what is the context. And part of what has been recommended since prior to COVID has been co-viewing, that when they're around the screen, they're actually talking to someone, they're with a sibling. And in theory, that sounds great, but in reality, we know that kids, it's hard to share a tablet. And when my child is watching TV, I may be asking him questions, but I'm trying to do something else or make dinner. So I think part of that co-viewing piece is not so much that you have to sit with them with the screen, but maybe talk about later. So what is it that you were playing? What is it that you were watching? Because I find that sitting with them with this device all the time is not necessarily realistic, especially if they're trying to engage with something pleasurable, something that makes them engage, like a video game or a video or a movie that they like that is not school content. Anya Kamenetz, who has done some of this work on screen time, recommends just that the media is not always at a fast pace. So she has some guidelines about cartoons or videos that have a lot of high contrast. So just trying to keep a balance between that content and other content that's not so fast paced, especially for younger children. And instead of saying there's no computers today, it's like, let's reduce and repair our habits, as opposed to saying, no, we can't just, we're going to take all the iPads away. Unless, I mean, I know we use them as a way to help children make better choices, but it's easier to just reduce as opposed to remove. Another concern is privacy. And I just gave a FERPA workshop to our students a few weeks ago, just to remind them that the applications that schools are using should be FERPA compliant. They have been reviewed by the district. But if a new tool is introduced, if you have your child use something that the school has not approved, I recommend using the Common Sense Media Privacy website. They have reviews of the privacy settings and affordances of many apps and websites used in education. So that's a good resource, like a consumer's report for privacy of what happens to the data that children enter, because you're giving they need your authorization to use a tool. So if something is not approved by the school, I recommend browsing or reading about it, and include your child in the conversation. How do they feel about their image being in the school photos or the video in Zoom? Because I think oftentimes it's a contract that happens between the school and the parent and the teacher, but it's good to also hear about how the child is feeling about looking at themselves in Zoom. And I know some of you mentioned you're in middle school, you have children in middle school and high school. I get tired of looking at myself in the video, but I'm old. I think I feel comfortable with how I look, but I think having those conversations with kids about what it means to be in the screen and to be represented, it's relevant as well.
Silvia, we do have a question while you're on that slide. Can you explain what FERPA compliant is?
Oh, yes, thank you. Sorry about
Oh,
that.
no problem. Just wanted to let you know someone had a question.
So this is the rights to privacy, the rights that parents have for schools to maintain the privacy of your child's records. So I, as a teacher, I need to maintain the privacy of your records. So if I have a volunteer, like, and this is why I gave this workshop to my students, because my students come in to tutor, to help tutor or to support teachers. So once they enter the school and the classroom, they have to maintain the privacy of grades, attendance, students' names, students' last names. So data that your image, your address. So all of these records need to be maintained in privacy, right? We can't, so one, and I'll give one example. I think when everybody went to Zoom in March, I think there was somebody made a screenshot of children in Zoom and put it on Twitter. And Zoom sometimes, I mean, as we are now, it has like your name. So that was not a good choice, because first it has the children's names and their likeness, like their picture. So that would be a part of their first name, their last name. So we want to make sure that everything that gets used, Seesaw, it maintains the privacy of records. And records include, for example, if I ask a child to read aloud to me, and I take notes about the words that they missed, and I use that to determine a reading level, then that is a record, right? So I want to make sure that the tool that I'm using will protect that recording, or it be securely, and districts veto every app. They have to pass a checklist of requirements, so that, because when we are in the school building, everything is in a cabinet, or it's in the classroom of the teacher and the teacher's computer. So I think every school and everybody I talk to, we're taking this very seriously in terms of just helping maintaining the privacy of children's records as we transition to remote learning, or as we are already immersed in remote instruction. So I hope, does that answer the question? Or I don't know. We can go back to this, but yeah. Thank you for that. Now I'll just talk about specific questions, and I know that there's many parents that are K to first. So when I help translate parent-teacher conferences, a common recommendation is read at home, and that is so big, because where do we begin, right? If we just read at home, and now you're being sent probably books or particular kinds of text that the child needs to read for particular amounts of time. So the first step is selecting a text, and then thinking about the purpose of why are we reading this, and when it gets complex, especially with younger readers, what happens when your child gets stuck reading a word. So I added here some questions in addition to what is your favorite topic, or what do you want to learn, when we're trying to select a text. And it may be the case that children have access to an archive of books, and they can browse and select a book. But if they're going to read with you or with someone, you can think, do you want to enjoy a story? Do you want to browse and read sections? Because if we think, okay, we have to read this complete book, and I'm holding a book now that has different facts about strange animals, we can just look at a single animal. We don't have to read the entire book. So there are different ways to read a book. We can just focus on this particular fish and the facts about this fish, and then we kind of begin and go in and out. So we don't have to read the book from cover to back. But a story, you may want to read the first chapter. Do you want to read to someone, read with someone, listen to someone read? And I know many archives of electronic books have an audio option. Do you need to research and learn or become an expert? So those purposes shape our choices. There are different types of books. Some of them, especially in those early grade levels, are decodable. That means that the child is practicing reading words with a particular pattern, and it includes high frequency words like he, she, who, when. For example, the cat sat on the mat, so all the words have the short A sound. And doing word hunts in those books is really fun, because if we say, let's just find a word that has the short O sound, O sound, O sound. And then the child can just look for that and they will find it because the book is designed to have that particular word, or I'm sorry, that particular pattern. Now there's other types of books for early readers that have a sentence that only the last word in the sentence changes. So they have a predictable pattern. A good example is brown bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. And then the next page is a different animal. So that sentence pattern helps the child chant along and then learn how to use the text resources to read the new word that is in every page. For example, here, milk, jam, and buns, those are the words that change. And the link in this slide takes you to a collection of predictable pattern books. I know that in some schools, the use of this type of book is not encouraged because the child is relying on the pictures to solve the word. So this is something that is good to check with your teacher and checking the needs of your child, because I know that for early decoding attempts, some schools are preferring to just use the decodable text, the one that has the practice of the particular pattern or vowel pair or digraph in a more targeted way, and then necessarily, but this for very young readers, it helps them use oral language to kind of learn that pattern and then use the resources in the text to see how to solve the missing word. Now, the last type of book is books with levels. And those there are many level systems, like there's the National Geographic readers and the Step into Reading books, and then the schools have their own level libraries. And beyond just looking at the levels, I could just recommend looking at the features of the books, because whether they have a level or a lexile is a way to measure how complex a text is. I could just recommend looking at it qualitatively, like how long are the sentences? Are there many vocabulary words that are new? Many concepts that maybe need to be taught? Is there a glossary in the back? And very importantly, how unfamiliar is the subject? So something I recommend when a child is really passionate about something and the book may be too hard for their level or what they can decode independently, is to look at many books about that subject at different levels. So for example, one of the programs we did, we went to the museum to look at the mummies. And so I had many levels and many types of books and different languages as well about that particular subject. So if I can build enough background knowledge with the easier book to read, then maybe I can browse the more difficult book and read it with support. And then I'll also become familiar with the concepts. So I have some background knowledge as I read a book that is more challenging, that the sentences are longer, that it has more words that I don't know. And this is where I really wanted to make sure I had enough time to discuss. When your child gets stuck in a word, especially in first grade, second grade, I would highly recommend to talk to your teacher, to his teacher or her teacher about bookmarks or what specific language is being used when they get stuck, because concise language in decoding strategies is important. When we tell a child to chunk a word or tap a word or stretch it, we want to make sure we mean the same thing that the teacher means. So I know I've seen chunk used in many different ways, or clapping a syllable. And I know some schools are having children tap the individual sounds before when they get stuck, and they use that as the first strategy. So they tap the beginning, cat, cat, and then they blend that. So different districts are, because of the curriculum they use, they are using different strategies. And something I've also heard from teachers is when looking at the type of word, if the word that the child can say is something that doesn't have a regular spelling, like a sight word, like said or who, we can't really have them sound it out because the spelling pattern is not regular. But something like had rhymes with bad. So that one we can read by analogy, or we can actually tap the sounds, but the tapping or the stretching is not gonna work out for every word. And then you have those longer words that where you can find a word inside a word, like transformation. So we can find form, or we can clap the syllables. So we can attack a word in different ways, but I think asking the teacher for whatever resource and language they're using in the classroom, that will really help with consistency. And another thing that I discuss with teachers very frequently is when do we give the word, when do we solve the word, and when do we turn it back to the child and say, you try it, or give it a little bit more time before giving the word? Because especially working with teachers who are beginning, it's very, it's hard. It's hard to see a child struggle, so we give them the word immediately. So I could also check with your teacher for guidance and say, okay, so is there a preference or something that I should be doing? Should I be helping less? And I guess the general advice I've heard is just to give them, count to 3, and then you can help solve the word, just giving them a chance to, okay, you try it. Now, if the word is something like brontosaurus or something extremely long, metamorphosis, then maybe you want to solve that word together, especially if your child is very young. There are many behaviors that take place when children read aloud. Some may indicate that the text is challenging, as if they're getting stuck in several words, then maybe it's time, okay, then maybe I'll read to you, or maybe you will help me with 1 or 2 sentences. And that way we continue reading, but and then we pick a different book that may be posing less of a challenge, so it doesn't become a frustrational experience. Some behaviors like correcting a word or rereading may show that the child is monitoring and thinking about how to solve the word. So that's good. That's good if they go back. I'd say observe, and then you can talk to the child. Do you think that book was a good fit for you? Some teachers or some classroom will recommend a 5-finger rule, that if I can't read 5 words in 1 or 2 pages, maybe I have to pick a different one. So I could make that choice depending on the level of assistance, if somebody's there to read to them, or maybe you can browse the pictures, look at the captions, especially if the book has something that the child absolutely loves. It breaks my heart when a child says, I can't read this book because it's not my level. And I'm like, books are books, stories are stories. There's many ways to read a book, and there's many ways to enjoy and learn new things. So I could not discourage them and say, well, maybe to practice this particular skill, maybe we'll read this book, but we'll still want to read and support them with the books that they love. And that's part of what we did in the tutoring, in our time tutoring, in our after school, that we had time to practice those skills and then reading a book that we loved. And I guess as I'm coming close to 6:50, I'll just share a resource that I found helpful if you find yourself being asked to do something that you're not very sure how to do. There's been a couple of grants by the Institution of Education Sciences. They fund very large projects related to reading and other learning topics with large awards. And some of these awards supported the creation of video tutorials for families working in kindergarten. And there's another set of series on 3rd grade. So that's a really nice, the 2 bookends of the most important stages of learning how to read. So those links will be in the PDF, and there's 29 videos for kindergarten, and they include like, how do we talk about when we read particular kinds of books, like Llama Llama, which is a rhyming predictable pattern book. These sample videos about tapping or separating a word in its individual sounds without reading. It's just using the sounds. Those tasks can be quite complex. This is phonological awareness, and it's clapping syllables, separating the word like at cat, just using chips, just using language. Those are complex. And so I found this guide really helpful for families to see examples. And the 3rd grade videos include more of a diversity of reading skills like vocabulary, comprehension, decoding strategies like what do you do when you find a big word, sight words. So the sample video is about a word like that has multiple syllables, like indifferent, disadvantage, unpleasing. Now, to be real, when I saw some of these videos, I thought, well, it does seem like, the parents have like a handout and a guide, and it does feel like teaching curriculum. But I thought, if I had my child trying to learn, I don't know, the silent E rule, and phonics is complex. English is complex. So this is a good resource because the videos include, and I will annotate The individual videos are at the end. So you can see the specific topics, and maybe if there's something that your child is doing, then you may find that as a helpful resource, looking at somebody supporting a reader on a specific task. So use them more as a resource as the need arises, as opposed to like, you have to do this in your free time. In your free time is just so precious now that the boundaries are so blurry, because home and work and school, they're all together at the same time. So I guess it's 6:51. I don't know if there are any questions. I'll just check in on questions, and then I'll share favorite books at the end, maybe.
Sure. I haven't received any questions through the chat. However, we are a small enough group that if you do have a question and you want to raise your hand like this, I can unmute you and you can ask Silvia. So does anyone have any questions for Silvia? I'm checking. Oh, we just did get one through the chat, actually. Any suggestions for parents with remote learners who think their kid might have a reading delay or dyslexia? We don't have a reading interventionist with our online program.
Thank you for that question. Yesterday we had a great conversation about dyslexia in my master's level class, because we discussed the topic of oral reading fluency. And the Colorado Department of Education just published, and I can put this, I'm gonna make this note, a dyslexia handbook that they put together in February. And it listed some of the, I guess, the procedures for, like you mentioned, there's no reading interventionist, but there needs to be a body of data that includes some of the assessments in that data set. Like we were discussing yesterday, we already have it, like those tasks like tapping the sounds or finding rhymes. So many of these, the tasks that we need to assess are language-based. Some of them are reading-based, like oral reading fluency, how fast they read, how fast decoding, comprehension, but the language pieces, some of them, if the child is in early grade levels, they may have taken one of those assessments. So that list of what needs to be done is in that document, that guidance. But my understanding is there should be a process, or it should be part of that referral process, because not every family can. I think that's part of the current conversation about dyslexia, just the affordability of having an assessment done from a private practice, and how, you know, we should be supporting all the families that need that particular assessment. But my understanding from our conversation yesterday and the resources I've been reviewing is some of that data we already have as part of the reading assessments that are done in the school. And I can look at resources and add them in that PDF, because so a part of what I was reading was we were able to watch the whole dyslexia assessment tasks, and it was like a 20-minute video that was really helpful. So I can certainly share those resources.
Thank you. And we will be sending out, like Silvia said, she'll put together some notes from tonight's talk based on your questions, and we'll be sending it out to you soon. Okay, we do have another question. Do you have any suggestions on how to encourage a kindergartner while sounding out words and trying to spell? Sometimes the encouragement coming from parents does not seem to land like it would when it's coming from a teacher.
Absolutely. And I could say part of that is the text selection. And maybe if there's somebody else involved, like for example, if grandma can join in Zoom, or having, I guess, an audience to read to. And this is part of what I really miss. I mean, there are so many things we miss from not being able to leave home because of COVID, because we could take them to the library and they could read to like a dog, or having an audience and a sense of a larger purpose makes it, I guess, more exciting. The other thing we have done, but not as young as kinder, but with older kids, is to have them record themselves and try multiple times. But since they're beginning to solve words, it may be more of a, maybe just keeping it also very short, and to kind of having that negotiation of, well, let's read 1 or 2 pages of this book, and then I will read to you. The other thing I was going to say, there are some spelling activities we did in our after school club where children were playing with word tiles, and then they would form a bigger word, and then we would read sentence strips with that same word, and they would still be reading connected text, but it was just sentences. So it didn't feel so because we were changing the type of text that we're engaging with. It wasn't like a book or a decodable. It was like sentence strips, and it made it more exciting, or it just looked different. But they were still reading sentences and solving the pattern that we were targeting, whether it was a short vowel or a particular sight word. But first we did a game, and then we read the connected sentence. So I'm just gonna make a note here about that activity. And I'm gonna think more about it too.
Okay, we have a few more questions. In the same vein as the dyslexia question, do you have any suggestions for right brain learners who have a difficult time focusing and where online tools are hard to keep organized? And this is for a 4th grader.
Yes, I think I remember that was one of the questions or requests we had when we were doing our after school tutoring, is not to use digital text so much. And I guess just to clarify, is the question about just a different type of text or a different type of, I guess maybe both, different type of text and different type of task? And yeah, and
I read it as, do you have any suggestions for right brain learners that have a difficult time focusing?
Okay.
On where online tools are hard to keep organized? So maybe is there a way to keep focus? Yes. Does that make more sense?
Yes, it's not about the text. Yeah, I was thinking about something else. It's hard because at 4th grade, I mean, I've seen some of those lists, and it is so much. And part of what I find sometimes challenging, and I know that people are trying to organize information in ways that make sense, but there are so many links and nested levels. And I think that it's so, I think probably just finding a way to simplify and prioritize may help. So it doesn't become that we have to complete each one of these tasks or these nested levels. But if we can prioritize 2 or 3, and then maybe creating our own list, or own priority list, because I've seen like some of them are tables that have links embedded in each of the quadrants. And then to join spelling, you have to go here. To start this task, you have to go here. So maybe redesigning that in a way that makes sense to the child and taking that ownership, and maybe setting 2 or 3 goals that are child friendly and that are written in a way that like it's almost like write your own agenda. Because I have seen, and I think as a parent as well, that can be very overwhelming to get that list of links. And from the teacher's end, it's like you organize your information in a way because you want them to accomplish all of these tasks in the schedule, but prioritizing and maybe redesigning it in a way that the child, and if it's paper-based, maybe it may make it easier. Like they can create their own like mornings and segment times in ways that make sense to them. Maybe morning, afternoon, or maybe it can be subject-based or priority-based, like what, as a learner, like what is the thing that I'm more interested in from the Monday list of links. And then I'm gonna put that next to a sticker. Just, I guess that's one idea I have, but I can certainly think about it a little bit more.
I remember when I was in elementary school, the school gave us agendas. I don't know if that's still a thing, where we would have to write our to-do list for our homework. And I know to-do lists are always helpful.
Yeah, that's something I observed in the classrooms where we were before COVID, that the teacher would have the children say the agenda. So today, tomorrow, can you tell your partner, what is it that we're doing? So there were so many opportunities to kind of create that accountability and that ownership, that this is not me reminding you or mom reminding you, this is you and your task. So, but now with the limits and challenges of remote learning, we have to prioritize and try to find information that comes in a big package.
Okay, we have one more question. How should I work on reading for my twin boys in kindergarten? Should I work on them together or individually?
and part of that question is also, I guess, if they have the same teacher and if they have the same homework. I imagine twins, when you grow up with a sibling that's close in age, I mean, you just share so many things. And part of, I guess, the challenge may be, well, maybe having some independence or some choices that are your own in some of those tasks. So if there's some choice built in what they need to do, whether it is text, let's say, for example, you can choose, somebody can choose nonfiction, somebody can choose. So you read a story and you read a book about books, and then you can talk to each other about what you learned about the book about books and what you learned from the story. So having some, I guess, opportunity to choose their own adventure to the extent it is possible. And I mean, they are peers, so they can read to each other. So that's wonderful. But also having, I guess, the opportunity to say, well, for this particular task, you can do it together. This particular other task, you can pursue your own adventure. But if they can read to each other, that's great, as they can solve words and practice their sight words. And so many of the activities that are in the kinder curriculum are like those sounds, and those are very game-like, such as k-at. So k-at, cat, k-at, hat. So doing those together is much more fun than doing them by themselves in the computer. So if they can play those games of playing with language together, and then how many can you do? And let's do 7. And or some of them use their body parts, or they use chips. So any game-like activity, I think, would be really fun to have a peer.
All right, thank you, Silvia. Thank you everyone for your thoughtful questions. This was very informative, and I hope that you all took something away from it. And like I said before, we will make sure to send you the PDF with all of the resources that Silvia included, so that you can have time to go through it at your own pace as well. And thank you so much, Silvia. And I hope everyone has a great evening. And some people are messaging thank you, and this was really helpful. So we're really glad to hear that.
Well, I apologize for my accent when I'm presenting and it's late. I feel,
I love your accent. It's wonderful.
I got this. I have my slides. So I hope, I will think about some of the questions. They're helpful to me. I love working with libraries, and every day is a new day. Yeah. I feel you, I feel like, oh, well, I don't really have all the answers as I'm trying to navigate it all. So every day we start over and we try our best, and we just, we're there for our kids.
Exactly. Thank you again, and good evening, everyone. We hope to see you again soon.
Bye, everyone.
Heidi's got some fun music to...
It's some kind of coffee shop mix, which also means I never know what it's gonna come out. That could vary in the music. Yes, what unusual times we are all in. I was wondering, Silvia, do you also have math? Do you do much work with math?
I don't. I mean, next semester, I will be collaborating more closely with my math and science colleagues. We're going to do a seminar together. We do some of that when it comes to literacy, for example, word problems, and the specific words that are like the vocabulary words that are math related, like teaching concepts, sort. But it's definitely not my area.
Not your, yeah.
But I have colleagues who can talk about math.
Yeah. Thank you everyone out there for joining us, and check out that page from our librarians. It's really wonderful. I personally have found it helpful in my own experience with my kiddos, my 2 elementary school kiddos. And we're here for you, your library, as much as we can.
All right, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and end our program. Thank you again for coming. And if you have a moment to take the survey, we always love your feedback. So have a good night. Good night, Silvia, Heidi.
Bye.
Everyone.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Will do.